Hi, it's Archie and back for the ADHD Care podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We have a special guest. We've got Matt, who is an internationally known keynote speaker, influencer, and educator, known for his videos on the behaviors of those with ADHD and neuroscience-backed tips on how to thrive with ADHD. So Matt, as I said, he's put out a lot of content online. If you just search for Matt Raekelboom on the internet, you come across him, and we'll share some of our links, some of his social media links on this podcast description, so you can follow and also watch some of his amazing content that he's put out. So let's bring Matt onto the podcast.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm Archie. Nice to meet you.
I'm Matt. Pleasure to meet you as well. I know
Excellent.
you and I haven't had a lot of interaction time yet, so mainly me and Lily, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I'll be looking forward to sitting down and talking to you about just your journey, really, and also
Oh, wonderful.
your presence online. I can see your plant, the famous plant in the back there.
It's
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 yeah,
it's a fun way to plug a video.
yes, it's blooming, and you're looking after it really well. So yeah,
You know, when you have something that you can neglect for 2 weeks at a time and then go, oh crap, and all you have to do is water it, it's the plant for me. It's gives you a
exactly.
lot of credit for not a lot of work, and that's what I need in life.
Great. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's only
Yeah,
9 a.m. where I am, so the day is just
really.
getting started. I've had a couple of meetings already and took the time to
Yeah,
get myself into a good headspace. So it's a
yeah.
good time so far. How about you?
It's actually 5 p.m. over here in the UK, so yeah, pretty late. It's quite dark outside, so yeah, we're
Right.
getting towards the end of the day. But yeah, so what part of America are you based?
I'm actually not in America. I'm Canadian.
Oh, you're Canadian.
And
Wow,
yeah.
wow. Okay. What part of
Yeah,
Canada?
so you can like me a little bit more if you're from the UK. Keep that one between us. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Excellent. Great.
Yeah, this is it's
Perfect.
the hiking and outdoor capital of Canada. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
if you haven't been
brilliant.
here, I highly recommend it. It's beautiful here.
I've been to that part of the world. I've been to Toronto. That's the only place I went to when I went to Canada. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay, interesting.
I'd love to come back and visit and explore like the Niagara Falls and all of these other places. I know you've got amazing places there. So hopefully one
Yeah.
day maybe you and me we can sit down and do this in person.
Hey, that would be wonderful. It's so interesting. The UK has all of a sudden boomed with creators and podcasters and all kind. It's unbelievable. I would love to go out to the UK. I need to get everybody collaboratively together and like one swoop. I need to come for like a week or two and
That would be cool. That
meet
would be
everybody.
excellent. Yeah, definitely. That will be up. I'll be up for that definitely. But yeah. So yeah, thanks for taking time to sit with us. And Lily showed me some of your content online, and I like how you put out your messages about ADHD and how you make it so fun and easily accessible for people and stuff. And I can see the amount of followers that you've gained through your work, which is great. So such an honor to have you on our podcast. I want to go through just finding out more from you about your journey, what made you come into this space, and where things are with you, and what you're looking forward to most in the future. So I suppose we can just start with your personal journey, really, with ADHD and how it influenced you to become who you are.
Absolutely. Just before we get started, just to ask you, how's my audio levels? Do I sound all right?
You sound absolutely great. Yep, from my
Okay.
end, it's all good.
Just
Yeah, yeah.
I obsess over it, so I just wanted to make sure it sounded good on your end.
No, no,
Um,
it
the
sounds great.
Yeah. The personal journey, I find with the way that I talk about the personal journey, you can tell me if I'm taking too long because I could tell the story over the course of 10 hours if I wanted to. And of course, I think most ADHD people can. I find that to the average person, I had a very, very a unique childhood, but when it comes to the neurodiverse people, I find that I actually didn't. And it's interesting time. So I grew up, my family is from Belgium in Europe. And I grew up with a very, very traditional European family. You know, they smack the depression out of you. We tend to shame people just for fun, and we don't really look into what's going on with us. We just shut up and work. And that was
Mm.
the mentality that my family had growing up. I'm the youngest of four children. So I have three older siblings that all they're 8, 10, and 12 years older than me. So as much as I did have siblings, I also didn't. They were off doing their own thing by the time that I really could understand what the world was. And
Right.
it led me to a lot of lonely experiences where I wasn't allowed to tell anyone that I was lonely because I had two parents and I had three siblings, and nobody was really ever around. My parents worked quite a bit. I was born quite late into their lives. And I was definitely the later child. And something that they didn't expect and something that I didn't expect was that I was a handful. And it became really, really difficult for my family. I was one of the people that got quote unquote blessed with an early diagnosis of ADHD. I did the standard way of people wondering about the treatments back in the day, which was I threw a backpack at my teacher and they decided that there was something there.
Oh
And
wow.
so they tested me for anger management, and then they tested me for any kind of disabilities, and eventually we got into the ADHD category, and they ended up diagnosing me and putting me on medication. And the thing that happened to me as a child that was just trying to get attention, as a child that was looking for that stimulation, those crazy boosts anywhere that I can, the biggest curse in the entire world happened to me. And the only reason why I say it's a curse is because this was the 90s and nobody really understood the information back then. I tried the medication and it worked.
Right.
Um, there's a lot of people that go, that sounds great, but the reality is the medication worked. So guess what? My parents stopped doing. They stopped asking questions. They stopped wondering what to do. We just started going, oh, all Matt needs is medication, and he will inadvertently, they never said this out loud, but essentially it was so that I would just stop bothering everybody. I became an okay kid. I could go to school without my parents getting a phone call in a day, and that was all they needed. Um, this led me to a bit of a more difficult time in my life because every single time I started showing symptomatic traits of ADHD, or God forbid, I even raised my voice, we'd go up to my psychologist and we'd say we need a higher dose of the medication. Back in the 90s, things were a lot less regulated than they are now. 90s, early 2000s, I should say. Um, because things were a lot more unregulated back then, our psychologist really didn't know necessarily what she was doing. And unfortunately, she kept raising my dosage whenever my parents were asking to raise my dosage. Without them knowing, without me knowing, we didn't realize, but by the time that I was 16 years old, I was on double the legal limit of Adderall on a daily basis as a teenage boy going through his new hormonal cycles, going through puberty. I was also on 90 milligrams of Adderall. And that caused me to be extraordinarily anxious. I had terrible acne. I had no social skills whatsoever. I was always incredibly quiet or way too loud and getting in trouble. There was no in between. And it led me to have a lot of confidence issues when I was younger. And it led me to a lot of frustrating paths throughout my life. Um, I do want to preface for anybody listening right now that medication absolutely is something that I am pro, but I'm not pro on medication abuse, and that is
Mm.
it's something that became very, very prevalent in my life when I was younger. Um, the things that this taught me, though, and this is something I advocate for this a lot, and I always wonder exactly if I'm saying it in the right way or not. But what the process taught me, what my parents' trust in the medication, what the lack of information that we had growing up with, which also did include my parents just not being willing to open a book, not being willing to explore further, is that I found out that pills were the answer. I found out that there is a regulated theme in the world, which is that if you take something, people will like you. And what this taught me as young as about 12 years old, 14 is when it started to get bad, is I found marijuana. I found stealing alcohol. I found my substance abuse journey happened a lot earlier than a lot of people. And I find a lot of neurodiverse people are very much in the same boat. I drank and all of a sudden me being an outgoing, weird human being was funny. It was funny to watch. It was cool to hang out with me. I did worse things than everybody else. I was willing to drink more than everybody else. I was willing to smoke until I was sick just to make everybody smile. Um, and I found my friend groups. I found addiction very early on. I found comfort very early on. What I didn't realize at the time was that a lot of that was based around happiness. A lot of that was based around, again, comfort and just feeling like I finally belong somewhere because I found the misfits. I found those that needed a little bit more. And Christ, for those that don't really understand it, I mean, when you have a medication that is stimulating your brain and focusing your brain, you can handle. Yeah, a lot of people on average has a higher tolerance towards things like alcohol and marijuana than people that are not on stimulant medication. And because of which, I was always that guy that could outdrink everybody and outsmoke everybody, and it only brought me pride. I finally had pride for the first time in my life, and it was in a bad area.
Mm.
I will fast forward a lot of the next steps because, like I
Yeah,
said, I could take 10 hours on this
of
story.
course. Yeah.
Um, but this led me into a tough path. And not just during high school, but especially after high school, when I became an adult, I already had the ground laid out to essentially understand that I was broken. I was told my whole life by my family, and this is not a great thing, but they told me I had a disability and there's no point in going to college. There's no point in aspiring for university. My father always had this famous quote that will haunt my brain until I pass, and that's that he. Oh God, sorry, just needed a second.
It's all right.
Um,
Take your time.
he always looked at me and he said, "There's no point in trying for academics, so go get a construction job and just have a drink at the end of the day." So guess what I did? I did the one thing that nobody expected me to do. I listened. And I went into construction right out of high school. I made okay money. I got once again a braggable moment when all your other friends are in university making scraps and you're making 20, $25 an hour. You feel pretty cool for a while. But what I didn't expect to come is that once I stopped getting the regulation of high school, when someone telling me when to wake up, someone telling me, when to have recess, when to socialize, when to use my brain, what I found is the addiction only got worse. I ended up finding psychedelics very early on in my life. I ended up just getting to very abusive places with cigarettes and alcohol and all these things. I ended up gaining about 100 pounds after high school. And it led me down a bad path. And again, I can advocate for these things all day long. I can talk about the story all day long, but again, to fast forward quite a bit, I ended up while working this job, I remember the day that everything changed. And this was it was a beautiful moment. I remember where I was, what I was wearing, what I was doing at the time. I remember everything about this moment. Spotify released podcasts. And I remember thinking, podcast, what a dumb idea. No one cares about this. But I was so bored because I got to listen to music all day long. So I went, I guess I'll listen to two people talk. I don't know why anybody would bother to listen to that. And I ended up seeing, I was looking for my 10,000th diet that I could go on. And I was like, okay, let's look up like health and nutrition, whatever. And I happened to stumble upon a podcast. And to this day, I'm sorry to say, but I don't know what the podcast was, nor was it any information that I remember exactly. But what I do remember is that it was the podcast was titled Nutrition and ADHD. And at the time, I was the only person on earth who had ADHD. I grew up in a town with 4,000 people. I went to a school with 400 people. We were very small, and I was very uniquely standing out as the weird kid, as the uncomfortable kid, as the kid with the disability. I was one of seven people in my special education class for the entire school. Um, I was the only one. And all of a sudden, there was a podcast saying, "You're not the only one." And I went, what is this? That's weird. I have this thing that no one else does. So I clicked it and I listened to it. And it was the podcaster, host of the podcast Faster Than Normal. It was Peter Shankman. And when Peter came onto this podcast, it wasn't about the information that he gave. It was the way that he talked about things. And he said, I have ADHD, but I live a wonderful life. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a best-selling author. I've written a great book. My podcast is doing wonderfully. And I remember just listening to him and being like, he's not a loser. He's not somebody who's just broken and dealing with it. He had all of these silly little traits. Like if he was going to go into a meeting, he always showed up 5 minutes late religiously and accepted that about himself. And once he did, he started showing up to meetings on time as long as it was within 5 minutes. And it became a staple for me. He talked about the importance of choosing your outfits every single day and, creating a good diet. And I started crying so hard that day. I started bawling my eyes out, thinking, what is happening? Somebody saying that I have a chance. And like most people with ADHD, and I promise I'm getting near the end of this story.
Yeah.
But like most people with ADHD, I didn't know that I was allowed to be okay. But at the exact same time, I had some great days. I had a couple of school projects that I worked on where I got A plus 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 because I got hyper fixated on the subject. I had some friends that I've made laugh harder than any other friends. I've had some video games where I could tell you the lore behind why they have blue shirts as opposed to, aqua shirts now. And I was still the stupid kid, but I had these interesting moments of my life where I was funny and smart and strong and mentally stable. And I always kind of just I never thought much about it because I was the broken stupid kid, but I kept thinking, what if I wasn't? And all of a sudden, somebody came out there and actually said, "You're not." And I became obsessed. That became one of the craziest parts about all of this is from that day, I started listening. The first night, I didn't even sleep. I listened to Peter Shankman's podcast. I started Googling the word ADHD. I just started looking everywhere I could to find more. And the thing that I found was not necessarily that things were changing, but that I felt less alone. And when I didn't feel alone, I stopped being so scared of things. I started realizing that sometimes I have a bad day in the morning, and that's okay. All my friends lying to me saying that they have great mornings. That's a big issue in our society now, as many of us lie to each other and just say, "Oh, I get all my stuff done all the time. I'm making great money. I have great amounts of savings." Most of us aren't, let's be real. And it was an interesting time in my life where I started realizing that humans were human instead
Mm.
of, the superhuman Instagram posts
Yeah.
style of people that you see way too often, the braggable society that we live in. And I started practicing. I
Mm.
started practicing stretching before bed and getting more hydrated than I normally was. And at first, I will tell you, one of the greatest benefits that I could have found is it actually made my highs a lot more fun. When I dropped MDMA or ecstasy, but I
Yeah.
was in a great optimized brain state. Oh my goodness, did I just have a better time?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was kind of an even better benefit that got me into a good place.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
it- and a couple more minutes left of this will help with this, but I had this moment, and I was dating somebody that was not good for me. She was somebody that also did as many drugs as I did, and to a certain degree, we were made for each other at the time. Um, and I had this one moment, which is a massive moment. I've talked about it my entire career, and it was the biggest life-changing moment of my entire life. And it was a day where we were about to stay up all night and do drugs and have a great time. And I looked at my girlfriend, and I have always been this personality, no matter what, whether it was for bad reasons or good reasons. I've always had this personality. And I looked at my partner at the time, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to do drugs in like 15 minutes. I'm going to make sure that I stretch and drink an entire glass of water first because Peter Shankman says that relaxes your mind, it lowers your cortisol levels, and it makes you feel a little bit better." And I remember I did it, and the most life-changing thing that happened to me on that day was I fell asleep. And it was my first time having a sober sleep in about 6 years. I had gone about 6 years straight out of high school, um, never having a moment of sobriety. I never bothered to be in my own head. I never bothered to think about things because I just knew that I had a lot more fun when I wasn't. And I woke up the next day, and it was one of the most life-changing moments for me ever. I woke up and I realized that my face was full of acne. I realized that I was significantly more overweight than I ever even knew I was. I thought I was. I'm not talking badly about being overweight or anything like that, but to me, I thought that I was still relatively skinny. I thought I was fairly good looking, and I remember looking in the mirror and just feeling horrified at the fact that I had never looked at myself like I was in that moment. And I remember it perfectly. I remember stepping over plates full of mold that were on our ground and clothing all over the floor and such a dirty apartment that we lived in. And it was the most eye-opening moment of my life that I actually left her. I left her everything that I owned. I had a panic moment where I just said, "I need to leave and I'm not coming back." And I took my dog and I took a Bluetooth speaker. Those are the only two things that I took. She had all the furniture, all whatever else that we
Wow.
had. And
Mm.
I left her to become homeless because at the time I didn't have a relationship with my family. I didn't have any friends left because I was not a very good person. And I started this journey that little did I know would bring me to this spot right here, right now, which is that I became forced into sobriety. I couldn't afford anything without somebody else helping to pay the bills. I couldn't afford any of my bad habits, so I got forced into sobriety. I lived out of my car with my dog, and I went through very, very terrible times in that car. I got a gym membership, and I got a gym membership just so that I could use their Wi-Fi and use their showers and stuff like that. And that became my day. I had a job, I worked hard,
Yeah.
but I had so much debt and I had so many bad things. I just couldn't afford a first and last on an apartment. Canada is one of the more expensive places in the world to live now, which is unfortunate. But it became a massive experience for me. And the true moment that really made that started this whole journey for me was the night that I figured I was going to pass away. I had a night where I woke up and I was in ice cold sweat dripping down my body and I was shaking uncontrollably and my dog was very noticeably worried about me and a moment I remember every bloody detail of to this day, and it was a terrifying moment, and I was really sure I was going to pass away, and my family wasn't going to know about it, my friends weren't going to know about it, and it became horrible. Luckily enough, being a millennial, even though I was homeless, I still had a cell phone. And what I did with that is I had no other choice, and I was just panicking like crazy. I decided to Google what's happening to me. And I started realizing that this is a part of the withdrawal process. When you're withdrawing from so many different chemicals in your body, you're going to start to get those ice cold sweats. You're going to start to shake. And what was interesting is I felt better because I knew I wasn't going to pass. So I knew I just had to get through that moment. And I got through that night, and it came over my head so much. I was so worried about something that didn't even exist. So I started Googling more things. I started being like, why do I have so much acne? Why am I depressed a lot of the times? Why am I anxious? And then I was like, what about ADHD? What could I learn about that? And I just started going down these rabbit holes. And this started what I didn't realize at the time was going to be a very promising career of so much studying and being in some of the most amazing places in all of academia, getting to speak at Harvard University and Facebook and Instagram. I've spoken at VidCon. I've hosted my own ADHD events that have completely sold out and had not a dry eye in the audience. And all of this started from me learning the ability to understand why something is happening. I started taking every course under the sun. If something had the word ADHD in, I bought it. I started learning about it. So much of it didn't help, but so much of it was just unbelievable. And I decided that I wanted to pursue this as a career. I actually really wanted to speak about happiness more than anything else. Happiness and addiction were the main fields of study for me when I was getting started in all of this. And while I was about to go to a new university, which is the last part of this story, I promise, while I was about to go to university to get a master's
Yeah.
degree in behavioral science,
Hmm.
um, I had a friend of mine that I ended up just going on a run with. I was a big runner at the time. I loved it. It's the number one sport that previous addicts get into. I always love that. Uh, I always love that fact. And I was a big runner, and him and I went for a run, and I told him about everything I wanted to do. I said, I kind of want to start coaching people. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And he looked at me because at the time I was trying to coach people on weight loss even though I had a background in happiness, addiction, ADHD, all of these things. I was like, I want to teach people how to lose weight. Because I was starting to get really good at losing weight. And I was starting to really get understanding as to what a caloric deficit does for you, what hitting your protein goals do for you. I really started understanding it. And my friend was in the fitness industry. More importantly, he was actually a course creator and a videographer for those that are in the fitness industry. So he works with professionals nonstop. And he gave me to this day the best advice that I have ever heard. He looked at me and he went, Matt, can I be honest with you? And I said, yes, please be honest. And he said, it's not going to work. No one's going to care. No one is going to care about what you're saying. And I looked at him with my heart dropping out of myself and thinking, what do you mean? I'm trying to like dedicate my whole life to this. And he said, and you sound like everybody else. But he said, do you know what you're saying that's really different though? Is that you include ADHD into all of this. You talk about when you're losing weight, when you're trying to develop a better life. You talk about optimizing your brain before you hit the gym. You talk about, getting yourself into a good place, feeling good before you decide to go and try and make yourself look good. I mean, he said, if you start talking about this, if you start talking about ADHD, I think people would love it. So naturally, as most ADHD professionals, before they get into the ADHD space, I find it funny how common this is. I looked at him and I went, nobody cares about ADHD. That's not going to help anybody. Like barely anybody has ADHD. I learned about it because I have it, but I don't think there's enough people. And he looked at me and he said, if you build it, they will come, essentially. He said, I think you have a unique voice. I think you have a good amount of knowledge, and I think you should really attempt this and try and talk about ADHD. So I went home. I live in Vancouver now, but I actually am originally from the Toronto area. And I went home to pack up my bags to move to British Columbia so that I could go to university here. And
Wow.
um, and I remember he was on my mind while I was packing up. I already told my landlords I was leaving. I already said yes to the university. And I decided to join TikTok that night. Now this was right around COVID times, which was the boom of TikTok. And I didn't have an account. I didn't like social media at the time. I didn't care for it. I thought it was just way too overwhelming. And I
Really?
decided to join.
That,
I decided to join
that's a
TikTok.
surprise though, given that you're all over social media now.
Oh yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
it was a hyperfixation that I did real right, I think. But
Yeah.
So I didn't have social media, didn't care for a lot of that kind of stuff, but I decided really aggressively in that moment, let's give it a shot. Adam told me to do this, and I think it's a good idea. So I made a simple video and put it out on the internet, like 45 seconds. And I basically said a lot of people with ADHD are moping around and super sad, and I want to tell you that you don't have to be. I've been through the drugs, I've been through the hard times, and I want to tell you that I made it out, and I'd love to show you that you can do this. And I made a little coaching sign up, and just in case anybody wanted to work with me, they could totally sign up and we could work together. I had a job at a local grocery store here in Vancouver waiting for me when I got here. So excited to just be somebody's bag boy. And I went to sleep with that video. It got 90 views. I was stoked. I was so excited. I was like, "Damn, organic growth is
Yeah.
wild. 90 people saw this." Well, I went to sleep and I woke up with that video at 180,000 views
Wow.
from one night's sleep. That video to this day, it accumulated a total of 2.4 million views over time. I went viral on the internet for telling people with ADHD that they have a chance. And it's something unbelievable, and it's a very, very big business brag that I'm very proud of. I had over 10,000 applicants to sign up for coaching with me.
Wow.
I created an overnight successful coaching business, and to this day, I've never advertised my coaching. If anything, I'll make a little Instagram story and say, "Hey guys, I'm accepting a couple new clients." I fill up usually that night.
Wow.
4 years into it, I've never ever looked for a client. I've never thought about it. At the beginning, I didn't even know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to help people. And when I saw 2.4 million people care about me, I went, I'm supposed to do this. This is a sign that I need to give this everything I've got. And I started watching unbelievable amounts of social media videos. I started watching coaching videos, and I started taking coaching courses and trying to look for ways that I can help people in unique ways. And I just became obsessed. I was sleeping for like 2 hours a night until I very badly crashed quite a few times. But I barely slept. I barely did anything else. I had a partner at the time. I completely ruined that relationship. I told her I need to take this shot, and it, it was way too hard to focus on that and still maintain loving somebody at the time. It became a very difficult thing, but I just became obsessed with the fact that every single day for about the past 4 years, actually longer than that now, every single day someone has told me that I'm changing their lives. Every single day someone has told me that I'm helping them more than any therapist or psychologist ever has, just from a 1 minute video. And it was my calling. It was something that I was born to do. It is something that every moment of having crappy parents, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I shouldn't use too harsh language. Um, I didn't have great parents. I was abused with medication. I found addiction very early on. I was overweight and skinny and overweight and skinny and overweight and skinny. Now I'm like a weird medium. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
yeah, I,
Before
I
I ask you,
lived a
yeah,
life.
I feel like there's so many questions I wanted to ask you because I just let you speak there,
Yeah,
and
sorry.
I'm sure. No, no,
Sorry.
no, 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 absolutely. And I feel you've literally answered three of my questions that I was looking at. I was just about to ask you. And I just want our listeners to just sit and just pay attention to what you're saying because I think it resonates with a lot of people. And
Hmm.
and I'll take my hat off to you. I like the word calling. It was a calling. And if you think back to when you were talking to your friend and who, encouraged you to kind of pursue this path. And you haven't looked back since, and look at you now. What I'm intrigued to find out from you in terms of like your personal ADHD journey, you touched on medication earlier. Where are you? And obviously you're doing your coaching, which is great, but in terms of for yourself, where are you with that journey? Are you on treatment? What are you, where are you with that?
So for myself, it's something that I don't encourage everybody to do because it is a very big commitment, but I am completely holistic. I don't take any medication for it. And my day starts off with about an hour and a half of making sure to optimize my brain to get ready for my day. My consideration for having untreated ADHD is incredibly worked into my entrepreneurial life, which has helped me immensely. But it is incredibly difficult. I will be honest, I'm a big fan of medication. I think that a lot of people need it as their first stepping stones. I know Dr. Ned Hallowell has talked about it many times that most of the behavioral traits of ADHD can be fixed without medication. He was a big influence to me in the beginning for a lot of that. And I'll be honest, I have considered going back on medication in recent years, the more that I research it, but just got way too scared from abusing the medication for as long as I did. My side effects were so severe, I'm worried to get into it. So getting into the holistic route was something that was incredibly important to me.
And what do you mean by holistic approaches? What does that involve?
So I am making, sorry, what was the end of that
Yeah,
question?
yeah, yeah. What does it involve? If you just elaborate a bit more on that.
Absolutely. So I make sure to start off my day every single day in my own thoughts. I make sure to reduce stimulation as much as possible throughout, especially in the beginning when my brain is first booting up in the morning. I make sure to get an appropriate amount of sunlight in my eyes as much as I can possibly help it. I make sure to get fresh air. I make sure to optimize my eyesight, my brain. I make sure that I'm incredibly hydrated at all times. I'm eating tons of protein and fiber rich foods, as those do optimize the dopamine release inside of the brain. And I make sure to stay consistent with that as much as I possibly can throughout my day, because it makes an astronomical difference for it compared to if I don't. I think, just as a fun fact for the listeners here, I think the most overlooked thing that anybody doesn't advise people with ADHD is to get outside before you ever look at your cell phone in the morning. No matter how cold, no matter how rainy, no matter how frustrating, is to observe nature. Because what a lot of people don't realize about when we are viewing our cell phone as opposed to actual nature is when you're viewing your cell phone, you are letting your brain know I am in full control over this situation. If I don't like the person that I'm watching on social media right now, I can just swipe my finger up and they are gone from my life. I never have to hear them again if I want to. If I am watching pornography, if I don't like somebody's freckle on their left cheek, I can get rid of that if I want to. If I am texting my friends, I can choose what I say when I say it. And what you're doing is you're letting your brain know as soon as it wakes up in the morning, don't worry about getting ready for things that you don't realize are going to happen. You are actually letting your brain know that it can relax and doesn't have to worry about new anxieties coming in front of it. But when you simply observe nature for as little as 5 minutes shows a positive effect on the brain. When you are observing leaves flowing, whether or not you are telling it to flow, your brain is going, "Oh, those are moving without my permission." When you see somebody, an old man walking his dog down the street, and you're like, "I'm not choosing how he's walking. That dog is peeing on the side of the road. I didn't tell it to pee." What your brain is realizing is it is not in control of that moment, and your brain starts to become optimized for things that are going to come without our permission. You're actually optimizing your brain for not getting overwhelmed or not getting anxious as fast because your brain is expecting something like this, as opposed to telling it to relax, don't worry about it. And then when little curveballs come out, like people that you didn't mean to text you, like things outside that are changing, we don't get nearly as overwhelmed. I think it's one of the best holistic practices that anybody should have is make sure to observe something that is not in your control before you observe something that is in your control.
And I suppose to just to add to that, do you incorporate obviously diet and sleep and exercise? Is that all part of the holistic approaches as well?
Absolutely, yes. Not so much. I always try and stay away from the word exercise. I like to incorporate physical strain on the body. A lot of people, when they hear the word exercise, myself included, sometimes I think, oh God, I got to exercise, but I don't have an hour and a half right now. I can't maintain a six pack at this moment. I can't, go and learn a new powerlifting clean and jerk. But when I think about physical strain, I think about singing, dancing, moving around the apartment, going for a walk, standing is like, it's one of my favorite things to advise people to do is just stand more because the thing that people with ADHD will not do is stand still. That physical strain on the body optimizes your brain in such incredible ways. So just a little side
Yeah.
thing I'm throwing in
In
there.
as part of your content as well, you talked about the unregulated brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So I find that a lot of people in this world, we tend to ask the question when it comes to ADHDers, we tend to ask the question of, are you medicated or unmedicated? Which, in my opinion, is a completely irrelevant question compared to, are you treated or untreated? And this is a question that you have to ask yourself on a daily basis. This is not something that happens for longer than 24 hours, unfortunately, for a lot of us impulsive people. Um, but when you're in an untreated state of ADHD, when your brain is not optimized for the world that is around it, you are getting overwhelmed quickly. Your emotions are significantly more dysregular than normal. Your thought process can go in many different places as opposed to having that beautiful amount of focus that we really do have the ability to have. Most of the behavioral traits of ADHD come from an untreated brain or an overwhelmed brain, where a treated brain is something excuse me, when you get the appropriate amount of water in you. It's a silly saying, but for anybody that might get inspiration behind it, your brain is incredibly wet. When you are dehydrated, your brain is getting less wet, and only a wet brain works. So you gotta get your brain wet at all times. It's unbelievably important. So to stay hydrated, to have your body moving, for your brain to be optimized in the way of going, I know that not everything is in my control today. This is something that drastically reduces. I don't know the exact percentages, I'll be honest, and usually those things come to bite us in the butt when it comes to the ADHD world specifically, because many of our studies are incredibly wrong at the moment. But when you have an optimized brain, you are drastically reducing the symptomatic traits of ADHD, such as emotional dysregulation, executive functioning skills, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. And I like that how you incorporate that, even for people that take medication, some of what you just described can be also incorporated alongside them being on medication, can't they?
Oh, every bit of it, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, your content has resonated with so many people. What I'm intrigued to find out from you is how do you decide on the topics that you put out there, and what is it that's, and I'm sure you've had so much, feedback as you mentioned in there. So, how do you go about? Because obviously consistency matters as well as a content creator, influencer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how do you pick to, in terms of what you want to put out? Is that based on your personal experience? Is based on feedback that you get from clients or listeners, followers? How do you decide?
It's the most disappointing answer ever. I think about the videos that I make about 5 minutes before I record them. What I
Really?
do is I live my standard ADHD life. A lot of people tell you in content creation, you need to batch your content. You need to record 5, 6 videos at once. I've never done that. Actually, that's a lie. I did it once in my entire career, and I hated it. I recorded 5 days worth of content, and then I just sat down like a lump on a log for the next 5 days because I had no excitement going on. I needed that stimulation of putting the pressure on myself of doing it in the moment. Um, but the way that I get my content ideas is truly I live the ADHD life as much as I possibly can, including the bad topics that I talk about. When you hear me talk about relationships or addiction, there are sometimes where I make a video and I go, "Do you have ADHD and you're struggling today?" That's not because I'm a good actor. In fact, you will hear this in many podcasts, videos that I've done. I consistently almost brag about it. I'm a terrible actor. Do not hire me for an acting role. I don't recommend it. I am myself. I am this hyper strange person. And when I talk about addiction, it's because I'm having issues myself today. I believe that I am cursed with the difficulty of worrying about my addiction issues for the rest of my life. I'm okay with them. I'm at peace with them, but I do understand that they happen. When I have relationship issues, when I talk about parenting, when I talk about brain optimization, it's because I had a day where I killed it today and I optimized my brain so perfectly, or I had a terrible day and I woke up and instantly went on my cell phone and stayed in my jammies all day. So that is a massive influence of mine. Another thing that for any ADHD coaches that listen to this podcast, I utilize my clients like crazy. I would never ever use anybody's names, but I personally speak to 5 to 6 people a day, about 5 to 6 days a week. So I have quite a few clients, which is it's wonderful to say. Um, but a lot of them, you don't exactly hire somebody when you're in a good place. So I hear a lot of struggles, and also I get a lot of victories with my clients. And when I get victories with them, I go, I should share this with more people. So I
Mm.
look around the place. I've met many content creators over the years, and the amount of them that are not coaching, the amount of them that are Googling their facts, and I'm not going to call anybody out, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're creating awareness in a very unaware world, so I think everybody has a place in content creation right now. Um, but the amount of people that have said, "Do you ever run out of content ideas?" And I go, "Absolutely not." This is a category that affects everything in life. Do you want me to tell you why having this hand cream next to me at the moment, why this is going to be good for my ADHD brain? Because I can make content about that. I absolutely can. If you
Yeah.
truly understand what's going on with the ADHD brain, I can just look around my room and go, "Oh, look at this. At the start of this call, I had an energy drink beside me. You want me to tell you about the positives and the negatives of energy drink? That's like 5 videos."
Wow. Yeah.
Um, you know, that it's it's simpler. What is that saying? It's not made to sound out like it's easy to create this stuff, but it's absolutely more simple than people think it is.
I
A
think
lot of
people
these things
overthink it. Sometimes, sorry to
are,
interrupt,
oh,
but
absolutely.
I think people overthink and they want to perfect the video. It has to be polished and they'll do five, six, seven takes, leave it a few days, come back to it. I've spoken to a few influencers. They said exactly what you said. You come up with the content, you put it out there, raw as it is, rather than trying to
Yeah.
overthink and all of that. So, what's been the most surprising feedback that you've received from your audience?
I think one of my favorite feedbacks is the idea that a 1 minute video is making people feel more heard than years of therapy. I think that the unique part about that is not a brag on myself saying that I'm better than years of therapy, but it's the idea that all of us are so uniquely different that you don't know what's going to impact you, which is why just getting one ADHD professional usually not enough. To be able to hear, to go into support groups, you might just meet a mother that's kind of, they're killing it when it comes to putting their socks on in the morning. And that person, that might loosely translate into some great things in your life. Um, I think that's probably one of the most fun things. I'm sorry, what was the question exactly again?
No, just the most surprising feedback that you got from your audience and followers.
Mm, surprising feedback is, truthfully with the imposter syndrome, I think is that I'm helpful.
Yeah, yeah, simple as that. And I think
Yeah.
what I like, because obviously I come from a clinical background, so I'm used to doing these
Mm.
diagnosing and from that side of it. What social media has done and what you are doing, if I think about what we usually say to the clients and the information that we provide them, the textbooks and the leaflets and all of that, some of it, yes, it's through research, but a lot of people have said it doesn't really capture all my ADHD. And I think, who was I talking to last? We did the last podcast, and I was talking to Dr. Will Dodson, and he was saying exactly the same. The patient is the expert. Learn from the
Hmm.
expert. Because obviously our medications and how we assess our rating scales, questionnaires, it's all research based. I don't think it's all of the things that you described there, they don't really capture ADHD if I look at it on paper. So there's some people that are being misdiagnosed or not getting a diagnosis at all because they don't fit into the mold and the box of how we are trained as clinical staff to pick up ADHD. The three core symptoms: inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. What does that mean? Whereas if how you
Absolutely.
put it out there, you simplify it to the point where some people that were misdiagnosed or even not got a diagnosis or not even think about ADHD because the term ADHD puts people off anyway. So
Hmm.
you're breaking it down into a more simplistic way that someone can watch it and go, wow, I get it. Compared to them
Yeah.
reading a textbook that breaks it down into all this jargon. And, that's what you guys will do influencing and social media has done. And hence why we've had this influx of a lot of people getting sick in a diagnosis. And I'm sure you're fully aware of that. So,
It's unbelievable the amount of people that are getting the diagnosis right now. But you're right. You can't read about ADHD on paper. You can't, and that's the difficulty for clinicians right now. Not to mention there's a severe lack in education for clinicians, and I don't mean to say this in any negative light. I actually empathize with them. It's so complicated. And it's so uniquely complicated, I find, that if you write about these things on paper, you're looking for specific traits when the reality is the fact that I might listen to a certain genre of music my whole life, the fact that I might have parents with certain beliefs literally impact the way that our psychology is wrapped around our ADHD care. The amount of genius level people that never get their diagnosis, or the amount of people that are struggling like crazy that would benefit so much from getting a diagnosis, but they struggle so much they get a more severe diagnosis. It's crazy. I really empathize with the clinicians, and I'm looking forward to the day. I really am. I've been saying this forever. I've been talking actively to the chat organization and going into the ADHD conferences and all of that. I missed it this year. I know that you were there. But God, we need to work together because you know what I have that you don't have is I have access to millions of opinions a day. A day. That is so unbelievable. I can access in one video what you might not access in your career as a clinician in terms of people's opinions about certain things. Now, are their opinions correct? Not always. Definitely not always. But the fact that I'm 4 years into reaching an average of 2 to 5 million people on a monthly basis. 4 years into that, I have heard more opinions than you could possibly imagine, and it's maddening. But the issue right now is I find clinicians are against influencers. A lot of us are like, well, you're not giving factual information, you're not citing your sources, and that one's your job. Your job is to tell us what is truly correct. But imagine if I reached the audience and I was working with you, helping us give them the perfect amounts of information. I spoke out, if you don't mind me. saying quickly, I spoke out against this quite a bit in the International ADHD conference in 2023. They had an entire panel. It was one of the keynote speakers that was talking about why influencers are wrong. I don't know if you were there for that, but it was
Uh, is that the one in Texas, in
no,
Dallas?
that was
No.
oh gosh, that was
Oh,
Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore. I was there. Yeah, I was
You
there.
were there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you know of that one, it wasn't necessarily bad. She made some good points, but the thing that I was really uncomfortable about was the amount of clinicians that were scoffing. The amount of people in the audience that would be like, look at this influencer telling people that if they smell flowers, then they have ADHD. And everyone's going, oh, they're all like that. And here I am. I do an hour of research every day, 7 days a week. 7 days a week. That is a rule of mine, and it has been even since before I ever got into this. I do a crazy amount of research. I do everything I possibly can to make sure that I'm accurate as possible, and I help more people than again a single clinician could possibly reach. And yet we have this disconnect where we're not working together and we're not correlating the studies. We're not trying to use each other to our advantage. You could be telling me what's right. And I proposed to Chad recently. I said, why do you not make a Chad certification for us to say this is a person that we trust on the internet? That would be an unbelievable thing that we could do. And this isn't to talk badly about the conference or about Chad themselves. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I think that that disconnect is one day we're going to be connected and it's going to change so many lives. It's unbelievable.
But the good thing, obviously, you have to give them credit, particularly with the conference, the one you're referring to, the International Conference on ADHD. They usually have a influencer as a keynote speaker. So they'll have a
They do.
research person, a clinical person, and a research. So in a way, they are sort of mindful and aware and actually wanted to include. But I know what you mean is they're going forward with it. How can we collaborate? How can we work together? Because there seems to be
Absolutely.
this disconnect there. You touched on obviously upcoming projects there a little bit, but I just wanted that was my next question actually. What are some of the upcoming projects or initiatives that you're excited about that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, one of the biggest projects that I am working on that is a total passion project that I'm really excited about is I'm actually writing a non-clinical program just simply called the ADHD School at the moment. I'm writing it from scratch, all of it my own words. And what I'm trying to do is explain it's going to be an entire program of courses that will be 100% free. And they're essentially made to tell you in human words. We're really not trying to go to the clinical side here. Human words as to what is going on when you're feeling rejection sensitive, when you have executive functioning issues, a guide to understanding your partner in a relationship, things like that. And that's a program that I'm working on very aggressively at the moment. I will be releasing my first one on rejection sensitivity, hopefully within the next month. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm making it a very much opposite of what everybody else is doing. I'm making it donation based. And every single one of these courses have the ability to have a price tag behind it. But if you go to the discount section and you type in the word free, everything will become free. And the point of this is to get the information out that many of us are gatekeeping at the moment, not even by choice, but just because it's so much work to not gatekeep it. And people don't realize how hard that is. So it's been a project I've been working on for a little over a year now, and I'm hoping to release those soon. It's going to be available in multiple languages and learning styles. I'm going to make it written, visual, and audio versions of learning styles, and I'm working currently on making it in English and Spanish, and eventually once it gets a little bit of funding behind it, I'm looking at making it available in all languages to go out to the world for free. So that's my favorite project that I'm working on. Besides that, I am an international speaker, and speaking takes up most of my time. I give a lot of keynotes. I give a lot of wonderful speeches at universities, hospitals, military bases. And the project that I'm working on right now is just simply getting out the information that people are okay, that people have an ability to be a human being, whether they are told that or not, and that they don't have to be scared because they're not as different as everybody keeps making them out to be.
I'm sure through your followers and listeners, you come across a lot of people that have misconceptions of what ADHD actually looks like or stigma as well. And a part of your work is to try and kind of demystify and break down some of these barriers as well, which is obviously great.
Yeah.
Um, if you could maybe just give us some of the kind of the misconceptions you've come across, particularly
Mhm.
when you hear about ADHD. Um, the term ADHD, I've spoken a lot about this word on this podcast, which actually doesn't help a lot of people. It doesn't, it puts people off. Honestly, I think
Oh
people
yeah.
hear it and they go, "What's that? Disorder? That's not me," sort of thing. Um, so yeah, what do some of your kind of clients and some of the followers that the feedback you say you get from people? What are some of the misconceptions that you've heard?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd like to back up your point. Yes, the name ADHD is not a good name. It has such a bad rep, and also it's not attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is that's not what's going on. So it's so confusing. So I just wanted to back that up. Um, the biggest misconception that I find with more people than I'd ever care to admit, is people think they're broken and that's it. I have an attention deficit, so there's no point in trying to have attention. I have executive functioning issues, so I can't make it to work on time. I have time blindness, and that means that I can never, ever tell time. I can't believe how much that is the norm. And I believe social media has actually aided that in a bad way. I think that everybody is kind of feeding into that a little bit too much, and that's a part of something that I speak out about a lot. Rejection sensitivity is not about if you will never, ever be allowed to be rejected or else. It's about understanding that we are sensitive. We need to understand the whys, and we need to reflect our past traumas on that moment. I think it's incredibly important to recognize that. But more importantly than anything, the fact that people think that they can't be helped is that in the entire world, I can't think of anything more detrimental than somebody thinking I'm anxious and that's who I am. I'm depressed and that's who I am. When we're talking about neurological deficiencies in the brain, the opposite of that and creating the efficiencies in that, while not a perfect system, is so hopeful. It's insane. And the amount of people without hope right now really is the biggest mission of anything that we're doing, in my opinion.
Hmm. What advice would you offer to any sort of individuals newly diagnosed, or those that are struggling with ADHD?
Hmm. There's so many individual pieces of advice that you could give, but the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is that you are not unique enough where you can't find the answer. So don't just read a book on ADHD and whatever you don't learn is probably something that you can't have. I would actually focus on yourself. I would become extraordinarily selfish for a little while and start recognizing that you get stuck on the couch a lot. We need to start asking questions as to why. We get very rejection sensitive. I want to ask questions as to why. I feel very unmotivated. I got to ask questions as to why. And the reason being, once again, is a lot of people just feel helpless. But a lot of people also, while having primarily, let's say, executive functioning issues, and they're sitting there reading about the rejection sensitivity and watching videos on people being emotionally dysregular. Meanwhile, they have one key area of their lives that they haven't even taken the time to read about yet. They just assume that they suck, but they're reading about some other things that are not so bad.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
becoming it. So to recap that, because I realized I just trailed off a little bit. I would become extraordinarily selfish and focus on the things that are affecting your life, not just generically reading about ADHD, because that's overwhelming. This is your brain. There's way too much information out there. If you try and learn everything, likely what will happen is like everything else in the world, you're going to learn nothing.
Hmm. Yeah. Coming to social media, so how do you perceive the role of social media in shaping perceptions about ADHD, both negatively and positively? And also, at the back of that, there are a lot of people putting out content out there. Some of it could be misinformation, and that's where, and obviously, it's not regulated. No one's going to kind of verify, okay, this is true, this is not.
Mhm.
How do you perceive the role of social media, particularly in shaping perceptions on ADHD?
Um, it's a blessing and a curse is probably the most simple thing that I can say. As I said earlier, there's I used to be a lot angrier about this, and I'm actually gonna state that I used to be so angry about social media. I thought that myself and like two other people were doing it right. And the thing that I started realizing is no matter who the content creator is, there's a lot of bad ones. There's a lot of great ones too. But one thing that we are all simultaneously doing is we're creating awareness in an unaware world. And I think that that role of social media, let's be real, even as a clinician, you've probably seen an astronomical change since about 2020.
Yeah.
In about the last 5 years, oh my goodness, ADHD is on the map as opposed to just you hear ADHD and you go, oh God, am I going to get that on me? Like, people were so confused. We had Peter Shankman referred to it as sit down and shut up disease. And I thought it was one of the funniest, references towards ADHD before this.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's essential that it needs to be here, but I think it's essential that better creators need to come on the platform. And I'm not necessarily saying that I'm one of them. I'm someone that's doing my best. But I think there are going to be people in the psychology space. There are unbelievable influencers popping up right now, and I think that's going to happen for ADHD as well, which is going to be amazing. In the meantime, it's playing an essential role, but also is giving a significant amount of poison at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing more clinicians becoming influencers.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
absolutely.
a steady rise in, yeah, which is interesting as well. So,
It's very good. Yeah.
yeah, no, I get what you mean. I think now we are in a world where we have, information online, social media, we got podcasts, which is great, as you say, blessing and a curse. But it's just that,
Mhm.
um, and I'm sure some of your clients, we've had the shortages of medication and how the impact that it's had to some of your
Mhm.
clients. I'm sure people like really like stressing over it. It's still not over yet. It's still ongoing, which is sad. What's the situation in Canada where you are, just in terms of the shortages of the medication?
Not as bad as America and the UK, but still quite bad. Even our diagnosis rate is still at about a year and a half at the moment, which is already rough enough. I think it's going to keep getting bad the more that the diagnosis rate is only going up. And that's definitely it's a tough thing, but our situation over in Canada is not good. People are looking for alternative methods, left, right, and center. Not to mention the just the scarcity of being worried about side effects and medication is
Yeah, yeah,
also a very toxic thing that a lot of people are talking about very negatively, which is not helping.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed sitting down and talking to you. I know we kind of digressed, and I know Lily sent you some questions, topics that we wanted to cover, which I think I'll be quite keen to bring you back if you wouldn't mind in the near future. And I know you touched a little bit on rejecting sensitivity dysphoria there. I would want to set aside some time for us to spend just to get your views on that, and I think it'd be
Yeah,
quite
I'd
helpful
love
for our
to.
listeners as well. But given that it's the first time, I just wanted to get to know you and for our listeners to know who you are and what you're doing. And I think because that's very important. Um, are you coming to this year's conference, the international conference on ADHD in the States?
I don't have a plan yet, but I have been paying attention to it. It is something I did regret not going last year. I will be honest, as much as I don't need to go into too much detail about it, but I've got some family stuff going on right now. And they are coming first for me at the moment. But I am looking forward to going back to the conference, and if I do go, I hope to meet you there.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll definitely be there. For people that obviously want to follow you, want to see what you're doing out there on social media, where can they find you? Website or social media handles and things?
Absolutely. So you can just look up my name, Matt Raekelboom, on all major platforms. If you're ever interested in working with me or even just getting to know me a little bit more, I do have a Patreon account that has a full community with daily updates in there. You get direct access to myself where you can ask me questions consistently, and you get an access to also a lot of people that are working on themselves as well. You can go on to patreon.com and type in the journey through ADHD. And that's where I'm helping people understand themselves while they're on their journey through this strange, strange life.
Yeah, nice to meet you, and hopefully
Yeah,
we
pleasure
we
to meet
we
you as
catch up
well.
soon. We catch up
Yeah,
soon.
absolutely.
All right, I will
It-
let you go.
Wonderful. Yeah, if you if it's completely up to you if you want me back or not, but if you'd like me back, I'd love to come. It'd be a lot
Yeah,
of
of
fun.
course. No, no, I think it'd be quite good for us to focus on the other things that we wanted to discuss, the topics that I mentioned earlier. So, yeah, it'd be pretty cool to bring you back.
Wonderful, man. I'm looking
All
forward
right,
to it.
good to see you, Matt.
All right, you too. Have a great day.
Have a good one. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.